the welfare of the child must be paramount. So generally, the short answer is who gets the children is determined by what is in the best interest of the children. So not necessarily the parent with the more money. It could very well be the parent with more time to attend to the well-being of the children. So that is a short, overarching answer.
Right. No, I think the who is one aspect, but the get is what I would like to focus in on. What does get? Because a lot of times people feel as though, especially fathers, might feel, okay, they caught by a city woman and they will give the child, and I can't see my child again. When we look at the word get, I think there's a deep, we have to unpack that get in terms of what does the law of Trinidad and Tobago refer to in terms of that get, namely, what is it, custody, partial custody, as the Americanized version would say, which I personally know differently, but again, people might have that we want to debunk some of these philosophies, joint, visitation, access. These are words that are all put into this get word, and I think we should start unpacking that.
I very appreciate your question, very much so. So yes, let's start with get. And you're correct. I underline your question. I suspect I can read between the lines. It would appear as getting refers to getting a car, getting a piece of jewelry, getting a watch or something like that. And if it's a child, is something that you get and you hold and you have as some plaything. So you're absolutely correct. So let's unpack get. So what we really mean to say is who is given sole control, responsibility for the daily welfare and upkeep of the child. And so you mentioned some interesting words: custody, partial custody, sole custody, joint custody, all of these kinds of things. Shared custody is a new terminology that only last week a judge I was before raised. So let's talk about custody. Because implicit in get is really the legal term custody. So when we talk about custody with respect to children, we are talking about the parent or parents or grandparents or guardians who have responsibility for the daily care and control of that child or the children. So, and inside this custody is sole custody, joint custody, and shared custody. Let's talk about the easiest one. Joint custody is usually available to husbands and wives who are now going their separate ways based on a divorce. And what that means is that both parents are equally responsible for the key elements of that child's life. And that will be education decisions, medical decisions, the travel out of the jurisdiction, change of religion, what the court considers the key major decisions in a child's life, and both parents have a say in determining what that should be, how the course of the child's life in that regard. But the child generally, I'm using one child to make it easy. That child, in the case of joint custody, lives with one parent on a daily basis. We will come to access shortly. Then we have the concept of sole custody. Sole custody, according to our laws, is only available to single parents. So if you were in a relationship but you were not married and there is a child out of that visiting relationship or that sexual relationship or that common law relationship, you are entitled, you can go for sole custody. And sole custody, it means that one parent alone makes all the decisions for the child. Then we have the latest development creeping in very nicely into our system is shared custody. Only last week I was before a judge and she raised the issue of shared custody, and that's where we are. And again, this happens, I've seen it happen primarily among divorcing parents, where both are given equal, more or less equal time with the child in terms of access. I do not want to go into access and visitation just yet. Just want to make sure that custody is clear.
Now, when we speak about the difference between, let's say, joint custody and shared custody, where you have equal access versus equal, I guess it was equal responsibility. Could we dive a little bit deeper into that before we move from here?
Right. Joint custody and shared custody, very similar in some respects. Joint custody, one parent still has the majority of time with the child. The child lives with one parent, but the other parent shares in the key decision making. When we come to shared custody, you're sharing much more in terms of access, weekly access, every week kind of thing, every other week kind of thing. It is more involvement by both parents when we talk about shared custody. Yes.
Excellent. So we've talked about. I understand that we are on the cusp of the divorce topic, and therefore shared and joint may be the order of the day. But in terms of those who would have had common law visitation, what sole custody is granted to one parent, as you said, what is the redress of the other parent that may be involved in the situation?
All right. Under the Family Law Guardianship of Minors Act, you can ask the court to retain your parenting rights, and once that is built into your order, you would have the same right to assisting in making the major decisions of the child. But we do live in a society where very often one parent relinquishes those rights completely to the other parent, and sole custody stands as is, one parent making all the decisions. I see we have a question from Kenyon Seeley again on the same issue of shared custody. So we still have shared custody, and he wants to know, is shared custody given with restrictions? Yes and no. Generally, the parties and their attorneys come up with a listing of what they would want, even down to telephone access, what time of day or night. And I wouldn't say it can come with restrictions, but it can come with exactly how we are going to share this custody. Because even like last week, the judge was saying, you may decide that it was a shared custody situation we were looking at, and her ladyship was saying, you may decide that a set of school books, a set of school uniforms, it stays by both parents. So the child doesn't have to be walking, back and forth with all of these things, and almost a similar home environment exists in both places. So it has a lot to do with both parents and the maturity of both parents with their attorneys sitting down and concretizing how we are going to go forward in the best interest of our child or our children. And the court generally would endorse that. So it's not so much restrictions, but rather, how are we going to implement this? Who is picking up the children after school? Basic as that is.
Yes, that is. Go ahead, Ms. Adam.
Apologies for being late and not coming in, but definitely enjoying the conversation. This is not my area at all, and I have but I do have some questions that I wanted to also get in here, really based on, former clients as well have been expressed the concerns. You would have spoken there about, you quoted a lot of judges. Many of the judges or the masters, as they are in family court oftentimes, looking and making practical consideration to the application of the law. I always like to try to convey to the listening audience the temperament and nature of family court, because oftentimes, because even the question, who gets the child, is very different than who gets the land. So you may go with a civil matter in land law, under property law, and it's a different temperament, it's a different requirement or standard in terms of who gets what. Is it the same thing in family court? And should two parties going through a divorce or two parties trying to balance custody or understand it, what is the expectation they should have in trying to mitigate such a situation in the family court environment?
All right, I like the word you use, the family court environment. And the most important thing you want to note is that the family court environment is very different from the civil court environment.